Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be continuing our high graphics setting map painting run as the Mali Empire in Europa Universalis 5. Now, of course, the run isn't real, but our feelings are, and so we are going to be continuing along. Last episode, we did focus entirely on pet technology. This episode, we are going to be focusing on how we are going to be developing our economy throughout the Renaissance age as things progress. Since it has been quite a while since we have done one of these, I think it's worth covering some of the things, especially the things that are highly relevant to this run in particular, as it relates to the economic development. Starting with, of course, development. Now, this is one of the weaknesses of the Mali Empire in particular. Development has several things that are important about it. In particular, we care about the RGO size, we care about the distance cost to capital, and we care about the building cost. And this is an area where Mali suffers, especially in this kind of dead zone over to the left here, where this dark red denotes, I believe, like 0 or 1 development. And this is going to be one of the few provinces that we have with which we can actually generate sailors, which we are going to be needing. And so we have this pocket over here, but in some sense we are kind of cut off from the rest of the world, and a lot of what we're doing is trying to bring ourselves to being a global power by bridging this gap here with our superhighway that we are building up with, of course, slavery, as it were. Now, to this end, it is going to be easier for us to develop control and also development on areas that are flat and also don't have any vegetation. And so we are pretty good on the flatland, kind of from the flatland perspective. We have an enormous amount of these. Where we kind of suffer is going to be more the vegetation. But in particular, this location is going to give us a bit of problems. And since we last recorded, I think that this is actually a really key location because I think that eventually we want to move our capital here. And the reason for this is when calculating distance cost capital, it doesn't actually calculate, it calculates from the capital out rather than in towards the capital, as far as I can tell, which means the capital being on the roughest terrain that you have is going to be something that is going to be nice, and this is actually just in the middle of a hill range. And so by putting our capital here, we can push control to the left and we can push control to the right, and we won't have to go over this hill tile, which is important because it's not only a hill, it's a hill woods tile. And so let's take a look at the foliage really quick here, where we are going to be having, this is the same location, there's woods as well. And so that's kind of what we have in our background condition, where we are thinking about is we need to push over development and control to the capital in order to be able to better establish stuff. So this is our current setup, where we have these yellow dots denoting towns, where we are looking to eventually unlock and put pound lock canals in these towns. And with the way slavery and capturing slaves work, by having these as towns with slavers in them, we can use captured slaves, move them over here, get the population to 25,000, and be able to build pound lock canals, hence slavery superhighway. And so this is what we have going on for us in particular. And also here, we are going to be moving things around in terms of our cabinet actions. Outlined in purple, we have 3 different outlines, and they all refer to provinces. We're going to be starting to use Dev Province on the core province here, which has our capital city right here, which is going to be the core area where we are looking to build buildings, stuff like tooling workshops, stuff like book builders, all these types of things, where we are going to be going for. We're still primarily going to be resource oriented. We do have quite a bit of gold in a lot of places, but we're also going to be developing province here because this will improve distance cost capital. And so as we push a line through here in terms of increasing our ability to propagate control by having higher development, reducing distance cost capital, this is going to make all of this cheaper. When we move the capital to here, we won't actually have to worry about this location in terms of how much development it has, which means we will just have to push for these kind of provinces over here. You could see very, very faintly, we have added a layer of a map mode on top of this, so you can see kind of the province view and take it on in a bit. Now, we are kind of, some of this is a little bit scuffed down here, but we do have some good resources down there. But coming over to the next map mode, we also also have an overlay here where we could get a good look at the resources, which makes some of the strategic ideas that we're doing maybe make a little bit more sense. Here is the current capital, and we in particular don't want to put towns on top of the gold because we will get more RGO levels where we have rural areas. So areas like this gold here and this iron here, we might leave well alone, looking to just have better RGOs. And in particular, there's 2 more gold locations here, and here is the troublesome province, which also has a gold location. We do need to put a city on top of it in order to push control through here, and this is one of the few river locations. Up here doesn't have a river, and so we have to go through this troublesome province, which is going to be the future capital. But after that, we kind of have smooth sailing to the coast. In particular, we're going to assume that this is increased control or it is a combination of either increased development or increased control, depending on how close we are to getting some form of dock or wharfs up in these locations. And the reason being is that just having more control will give us a lot more sailors. And by having more sailors, we will be able to scout out. There is off the coast a very important island that is going to be essential for colonization. Rushing it early is going to be useful, and what we need in order to explore that is in fact more sailors. But this is going to be good for us, and also having the capital here is going to be pretty nice for us because it is near a bunch of gold. We will be getting value off of that gold. So that's kind of a closer look at what we have going on here currently. I think it's also maybe worth noting that we do have a really nice colonization going on here that is going to pick up the saffron and the gems, and the colonization we have down here also has saffron coming in there and gems as well. And then this colonization is more just expedient and a faster colonization, just looking to claim the rest of the province that we kind of already have started to get a little bit of a hold of. You can see that it is in fact all one province here. And if we don't colonize it, Spain will, and we don't want Spain as a neighbor. The past 14 years were times of significant economic hardship for Mali here. We have 2 pressing issues that we have struggled through over the past 14 years and come out on the good side of, but that is both the Malian disaster as well as the Black Plague layered on top of each other gives some sort of nasty effects. Speaking first of the Black Plague, what it really attacks you at is your pops, where you are going to have a lot of pops dying. One of the reasons we didn't expand too much during this time period is that we have, when the Black Death is going on, a desire to not move our troops around and spread the Black Death more, which is why we have maybe done only a couple wars over the past 14 years. Beyond that, where it really hits you is the qualifications. Qualifications are significantly hemmed in, and this affects our strategy for economic development during this time period. We specifically want to spend more of our time not improving RGOs or building buildings, but by going and investing in things that can actually affect and help our economy in an immediate way. So one of the things we are doing here, or have done, is we've upgraded a few towns, just these 5, but notably, we are relatively poor during this time period. We are an export economy. We are trying to, delve into RGOs and export them, and we lost a bunch of qualifications, meaning our RGOs are not fully employed as a result of the Black Death, and also the other economies aren't able to trade as much as with us as we would like, meaning that our prices get depressed, and also as our pops die, there's less demand for goods as well, so everything gets depressed. Remember that we have low development. Development is also a big driver for demand. Another thing we are pushing is roads, because roads do not have any sort of drain on qualifications. They don't require any pops to work them, and what they do is, for the purposes of control, they decrease the amount of distance you have to travel in terms of base cost for purposes of calculating proximity from 40 to 20 for a basic gravel road. Higher level roads will reduce this by a flat amount that is larger, and that is what the dotted lines we now have are denoting. We, as terms of our road connections, have decided to connect as many towns and cities as possible as we can, because we are going to be building buildings in these urban areas, and the buildings, by virtue of having more control, will give us more value, and so we want to connect them up here, but also we are building roads to specifically resources that are quite valuable, and we have put a couple of these resources on the main map to designate our intention that we are not going to upgrade these to urban areas so that we have higher RGO levels. I think in terms of where where the river actually travels. It might go over this iron, but I'm not really sure in terms of where the river is actually in game. We are going to assume that the river is across the path we have already constructed, but you can see here we have connected up the gold, we've connected up the iron. Cotton is fairly good, so as we get a little bit more road spots, we're probably going to connect the cotton here and the cotton here. There is also a connection to the gold, and we are also looking to push a connection. We pushed it all the way to this cotton, but eventually we want to connect up to Timbuktu, and in the long term, when we integrate Songhai, we do want to have a road headed on over there, but we don't have any really powerful resources other than that we want to connect. Maybe this wool would be a nice connection also to have, but in addition to this, roads give something that's very valuable, which is if they are traveling over a river or in a province or location rather with a river, they will allow you to build bridges, which give -5% distance cost to capital, which is also quite powerful and gives a compounding effect because each of these roads will not only reduce the distance that you have to travel here, but you travel, or for the purposes of proximity, you calculate every single segment. And so since this segment gets cheaper here, that actually increases the control here, even if it weren't connected by a road. So if we were to go in a road path all the way to the stone, by virtue of this connection here and this connection here now having a road and bridge, makes it so that the stone location, even though it's not connected to the main hub, is still going to have significantly more control than before. So we're going to look to radiate out sort of veins as well in terms of our strategy. So this is a major vein we have over here. This is a vein we have here that we eventually will push to the coast. And this is a vein that we have traveling over here towards where we are trying to get a little more sailors. And the additional control over here is going to also allow us to have more sailors because control is a dampening effect on both sailors and manpower. Finally, in rural areas that we are expecting to keep rural, so these gold places, this iron, this gold here, maybe this beeswax, maybe a couple of these cotton, in these areas we are also going to be building villages, because villages, in terms of their qualifications, do not require laborers. They are employed by peasants, and while generally they are a less useful building, they do also give you max number of laborers. So if we're building them in the gold and also in the iron, this means when we eventually expand the RGO, they do employ up quicker, and by virtue of being close to the capital and having a lot of control, even though it's a generally inferior building, we will still be able to get decent use out of it by virtue of having full access to the building's value rather than partial access due to having less than maximum control. Ideally, before building all of these roads, or before going on a massive road building spree, we do want to wait until we have a parliament for expand gravel roads, which is going to push us to a centralization. But another value we want to push for is, I think, land rather than being maritime oriented. In our Korea video, we went navally oriented. I think for this run, we definitely want to go land oriented for that flat decrease on distance cost to capital over land. I think eventually, even in the long term, we're pushing in deep to the right through the flatlands in this area in Western Africa, and we do want to actually make use of this territory, and we do kind of want to have our base of power be here rather than be some type of maritime country, although we could, in theory, move the capital to the coast and look to push control to Maghreb if we wanted to be maritime oriented, but also on the land what we get is an extra juice to RGO size. Since our RGOs are really good, I do think that this is quite powerful. Not only do we have all the gold we started with, but in the long term, we have a ton of spices coming in saffron and all these areas, and we will have to fight Europeans for these lands, but they are quite close to us, and it is going to be very valuable. And so I think the extra RGO size maybe is sufficient justification that even though maritime is really good, us leaning into the land, getting the flat minus distance cost is going to be quite valuable, and so we're going to look to push that during our parliaments as well, whenever we get a debate that allows us to push towards land. Speaking of parliaments, we are going to really want to go out of our way to not fail parliaments because of the stab hit, mainly because of the disaster that we are in, layered with the fact that we are dealing with the Black Plague. The Black Plague gives you stab hits, the disaster here gives you negative stab, and what this is going to result in is us having really low satisfaction. When you have negative stability, one of the things that hits really hard is a state satisfaction equilibrium. I can't remember the exact numbers, I don't have a screenshot. I think at minus 100 stab, it's something like -50 or -100 state satisfaction, it is extremely painful to be in negative stability. And as a consequence of this, we're going to assume that we're going through a time of negative stability. This negative satisfaction pushes us to the point where rebels start developing. We are not going to be gaining prosperity, so our development will stagnate as well, especially in areas that we are not fully accepted. And so for this time period, we are assuming that we are playing whack-a-mole, at least to some extent, with our cabinet actions, where we get an additional cabinet action from the Renaissance tree in the Renaissance age text, but we are assuming that it is only at the end of this kind of 14-year period that we finally slot it in to develop a province here. And other than that, it's going to be busy incorporating these lands, culture shifting. Same with some of these lands, culture shifting over here, so that this can become a full core, which is going to be valuable for us. And we are going to be playing whack-a-mole in that way, looking to prevent rebellions, put down rebellions, get us to the point where we have enough satisfaction to develop the prosperity, to be able to improve our economy. And also, through all this, we do have a bad estate privilege, if I recall correctly, that we want to remove, which is going to be a 90 stab hit. And so one of the reasons we're going to be developing economically slowly is a result of this disaster. We need to push legitimacy, we need to push stability, and for both of these, for our budget, we are going to be max investing into these, which combined with the 3 colonies investment, which was too much, we shouldn't have put in these many colonies, is going to mean that we don't really get much economic activity done, which is why we kind of only get, for the most part, these roads, these villages, these towns, and a few other opportune investments, but we don't really get very many urban buildings throughout this time period. So to speak to our plans here, and a little bit of commentary on our expansion, we are expanding via area, an entire area at once, giving that to a single subject. So Songhai owns an entire area, plus I think a little bit over here that we just gave to them, which is going to be incorporated for us when we reintegrate them anyways. These guys we have given an entire area, and I think generally speaking, expanding subjects through either cultures or areas is pretty reasonable. We're choosing area. I think it's probably a little bit worse, but it's a little cleaner on the eyes, and we do care about the way our map is painted. Down here, this red is territory that we've given to Jolof, which we have started to integrate here. And I say started to integrate because this is the only screenshot we have of the integrate icon, so everything we do is going to be starting to integrate. But once they are fully integrated, this is going to give us a good opportunity to start developing a whole lot more sailors and get a pretty nice urban area over here. I really do think that this area is quite strong to develop. If we take a look here, we can see that there are farmlands in this region, and I do believe they're flatlands, farmlands, grasslands, and so this is actually a pretty nice area for an urban center. This would be a reasonable place to put a capital here, and it's kind of the only coastal area that is reasonable to put capital, so we're planning on eventually developing a market there. So we are integrating Joluf here, which is going to really expand our empire both here and here, where there are some extremely strong resources. This is a big reason why we want to integrate here. It is a little bit scuffed looking, but this is gold here, this is gold here, gold here. I think there's another source of saffron down here. Maybe it does look like it's a little blocked up. There is some saffron here, and so these areas are going to be quite valuable as well, as we look to get them in and develop them ourselves. And we want to also think of this in terms of veins, where we are pushing control in a single line through the developed province interaction. And so what we are going to be doing, if we eventually move the capital here, which I think we will, we can think of this as a vein that we are pushing towards this coast, so we will actually be able to have a bit more control in this high value area that has all of the gold, and premium resources that we are talking about by virtue of having more development. We have minus distance cost capital, it compounds, and every single province we travel through is now under dev province when we start to dev over here as well. We are pretty soon going to stop deving over here and either shift it over here or look to shift it over here. One of these is going to make sense, and we'll take a closer look at it when we are back with our next time jump. So 16 years pass, and this is where we really start to hit our stride, making really significant advances in building a power base, both in terms of urbanization and control, and also starting to unlock more of our potential by gaining more access to more trade, by getting more trade range from technology. So with our additional trade range, we probably had access to Fas before, but now we gain access to Al-Jazair. With this additional overland trade range, there's an additional market also in Tunis/Carthage that is not shown on this version, which would also, if I'm not mistaken, which would also be something that we would be getting close to access, but maybe not having unless we really improved our land value. Eventually getting Sevilla would be useful, but I don't think we would have that at this point with our current technology. But an important thing to note is that not only do we get an additional place to dump our gold, which is a primary kind of mover in our economy, but also the Europeans, once we export to Fas, as long as we're producing or creating a surplus in Fas where they have more sell orders than they do buy orders of gold, the Europeans can import from Fas, increasing the price in Fas, which then allows us to export at a greater price in Fas, and the same with Al-Jazair. And largely our economy up until this point has been driven by caravanserai in terms of trade, these rural building, or this building that can be built anywhere, and it's only now as we start to urbanize, we start to go into building marketplaces as well, and really pushing up our trade capacity. I think we would also gain access to the Najimi, which features Kenem Bornu, as well as maybe this market here to the south. And notably, we did capture Benin as part of our expansion strategy, although we chose not to take the actual market center itself. I think this is reasonable for expansion and probably pretty strong, but we decided to play it a little bit more conservative. They are pretty far from where we are, and we don't really want to use a cabinet action to integrate it because our cabinet actions are relatively pressured, but this too will add additional places we can trade, and these places don't really have the same quantity of gold that we do, and so we will have good opportunities for exporting gold to these places. So you may have noticed the requirement of glass on the marketplace. Generally speaking, a lot of these urban buildings have additional requirements in terms of goods that can only be produced in urban areas, like glass, which requires either towns or cities, but also stuff like fabric, stuff like luxury fabric, stuff like books. All of these are things that we are going to be starting to lean into ourselves, and with this, we will unlock more potentials to build sort of urban infrastructure or civilian infrastructure for ourselves that are going to help us out. Stuff like temples, which increase max control, are going to be very valuable, although we will have been building some amount of temples, perhaps importing some of these goods throughout the run so far. Stuff like libraries, which are going to give us plus 10 to our pop promotion rate. Base amount is 10, so this is effectively doubling it when we first gain access to it. This is going to be very, very useful for us in order to get qualifications to keep these urban centers flowing. We want more qualifications, more centrally located towards our capital, rather than building more towns to gain more qualifications. We want them really kind of brought in. I think it's worth maybe discussing again a little bit on control and market access. If an area has a 100 of each, the building is just going to be producing max value, and that is the case in here in Niani in the capital. But if you have 80 control and 100% market access, you will only contribute 80% to the tax base when you are using a building, and when you have 80% market access and 100 control, you instead will only producing 80% of the output of the goods in buildings. And in this way, if you have both of these conditions, you'll only be producing 64% of the value. So this compounds really quickly. And it is a place like this that might be something close to, at this point, 80-80, or maybe even here is close to 80-80, something like this, where we're really not generating as much value. So we want to produce in here as much as possible, but then we will get throttled by construction speed, which incidentally, development increases our construction speed, right? But we can also get throttled by qualifications, which is one of the reasons why we want these libraries. And so it is with the idea in mind that once we get throttled by something in the capital, we are going to build in the next best places, so we radiate outwards. And then once we have occupied all of these towns, we add more towns that we can build in, and then we start building in these. And so we start to have a circle radiating outward. And this, knowing that this is going to happen, has informed our strategy in terms of our overall infrastructure, where we are concerned with creating veins by which we can propagate control, and it's starting to all really kind of come to a head now, to some extent, where we have these developed provinces in a line here, with the idea that we're eventually going to move the capital here. We have been developing province now for 30 years, that's 360 months, and each one of these is going to give us, roughly speaking, 2.5, we are going to get 0.25 progress towards a development per month, or 0.025 per month. So over the course of 10 months, we will get a quarter of a value here. If we divide 360 by 4, that's 90, and so we will be gaining, or we have gained, as a result of our dev provinces, roughly 9 extra development in each of these provinces. Since we have 20 proximity to travel as a result of having roads in these places, roughly speaking, for every 5 distance cost capital modifier we have, we will get an additional control. Since we've gotten 10 from dev province, we're effectively getting an additional 2 control in all of these areas as a result of having decreased distance. However, this is compounding. So if we come over to this location here, from Niani to this location, that's 2, right, as a result of the deving that has taken place. But this place's proximity, it gets calculated in a chain. It's this place to this place to this place. So this place is going to get 2 from their own development and proximity improvement, but an additional +2 for over here. So relative to what we had before we started deving the province in this way, producing a power base, producing veins, we're going to have +4. Here, we're going to have +6. Here, we're going to have +8. And this means quite a lot when it comes to the value. Moving up to +8 is a big deal. We also have a bunch of these buildings that are increasing control, like the temples and this type of stuff. So really, at the start of the game, we maybe had something like 40 control in some of these surrounding areas, and now we're probably up to maybe on the outskirts of this power base, something like 70, and in here, maybe 80, 90, this type of stuff, and then 80 kind of more on the radial distant type of area, and this is only getting better and better for us. And so this is really kind of the idea strategically around this power base part, but also in the long term, we are looking to eventually have pound lock canals pushing a line of control here, and the idea is that other places will be able to link up to it. And so in the sense that we have this control going in a line here where we get +8 distance, any place that links up to this, whether it's from the south or the north, is also going to get +8 control effectively relative to what they would have gotten before. And so that's what we're doing here, is we're really trying to secure a power base, and I think now it's becoming more obvious some of the effects that we are getting as a result of playing in this way. I think it's maybe worth taking a look at a relatively well-developed power base that we have here from our Korea video. In particular, the year is 1423, so it is relatively deep into the run. And you can see here we have a ton of areas that have 100 control. That's a full 100 control. A lot of this is a result of using maritime spread, but we're going to spread really well via land and Mali because we are going to be focusing that. But also, you do see some of the effect of a pound lock canal chain that we have here, where you are seeing the fact that it progresses in a chain, really affecting this and allowing us to have 100 control out here due to there being links of discounted areas. We have dev province for quite a big portion of this run, but only in one province and not throughout the entire run. So less commitment has been made towards the deving of province here in our Korea run, but a big part of that is the idea that you can see all these ships here. We are using maritime presence to spread control, and you can even see off to the far left we do have an area that is across the bay that has quite a bit of control. But this is what we're looking for. We're looking to have a big chunk be 100s, and then a chunk outside of this to be 90s plus, and have this be where most of our urbanization is. We're not quite at that point, but also if we do have these lines that we are tracing through the area, you can see that they still get pretty good control next to them. This is some serious terrain. I do believe this is a mountain, and so the fact that it is 82 is a result of them linking up into this chain that we have driven forward here in this Korea run. So we have pushed up control a lot, and notably we've pushed up control a lot where we have a lot of upgraded pops, and as a result of this, we're also very likely to have increased our crown power as well. Now, as you can see, look, there's a really negative crown power malus for being under 25 crown power, where you get huge penalties to tax and trade efficiency. And we have likely, before this point, been really suffering under this throughout the entire run as a result of having a lot of really low control areas. It's the average of all of your pops in terms of determining control, and since we have a large portion of pops here and this area is now higher control, the malus we have from low control giving negative crown power is significantly diluted at this point, and so this is a huge driver that is helping us out. There are also two buildings in particular that are going to be helping us out here, one of which we've likely just unlocked in somewhat during recent times, probably during this leg of the run, which is the counting house. Plus 33% control. It's very, very straightforward, and we are in particular building it in our power base areas to really push up this crown power average, because this is where we have a lot of pops. Where we have a lot of pops, it will have more impact on our overall crown power. But also notable is the bailiff, which gives 30 proximity. Now, the bailiff isn't going to be useful kind of in this region here, where we can propagate proximity, but stuff that's outside of it, stuff that starts to get really far away, will just be able to benefit from 30 proximity, and it's effectively plus 30 control. And so in particular, in rural areas where we know we don't want to build over the trade good, we are going to be putting down bailiffs everywhere, or in these places. In particular, we've done this throughout the run, we just haven't really talked about it, or this is something we would do relatively early, but in places like this location here, which has ivory that we don't want to build over, this is going to be good. And then we can build a road to Timbuktu here and propagate control towards some of our farther away urban areas that we just started the game with. We didn't build this town here, we just started with it. You could see we have the same idea here with the salt, where we are pushing this forward, but basically every area where we have now on the map these locations that have our resources that are far enough away from the capital that we're really not going to be getting the proximity, we would be building bailiffs in. And so this is a big part of the idea. Don't need a bailiff here, it's close enough. Maybe need a bailiff here, but would definitely need a bailiff on these dyes and this salt, and this will in turn kind of push out control towards these surrounding areas. And so it makes sense to build roads directly into urban areas if we do have a location that is like this, where we have built the bailiffs out, and this plus 30 control or this plus 30 proximity giving plus 30 control is going to decrease the malus from having low control as it relates to crown power. And so in this way, we are also helping to push our crown power up. So you may have noticed that some of these yellow dots here have been transformed into green dots. That is not an indication that these are new capitals, but rather these green dots are cities, so it's worth taking a look at the differences between towns and cities. As it relates to what we've been talking about, towns give plus 5 flat control, and cities give plus 10 flat control. Cities also give a ton of potential pops or potential qualifications. This gives you a sort of qualified pops in waiting for a job to appear where they will instantly employ it. But as it relates to crown power, since the promoted pops generate a lot more crown power, or generate a lot more influence that gets translated into crown power, having a lot of cities inside your power base will push up your crown power as a result, and this is a bit of an interesting thing. The control is probably the most significant thing, but also plus building levels goes up from 25 to 100, which is going to be significant since you are pushing as much as possible within the power base, and you don't want to get crimped by the soft cap of building level, at which point buildings start getting really expensive, and this is going to be a negative thing. Also notable is 25% construction speed. So the construction speed will allow you to build more, which makes it less necessary for you to expand out in this way. Now, expanding out into a city is going to require some of these higher tier goods, and it's also going to require around 4 to 5 times as much money as upgrading a town, maybe a little bit more. And so this is a really significant investment, but we in particular, we need to have cities along the vein we are trying to draw all the way to the coast here, because this is where we need to have a city in order to build pound lock canals, which is part of our strategy. So as it relates to upgrading towns to cities, normally we would upgrade radially out from our capital and do this sort of thing as a power-based consideration, but instead we're going to see us upgrading in a bit of a line. Also, it requires 25,000 pops to upgrade. Normally this is a throttle, but since we can direct where slaves go into areas that have slavers and then just delete the slavers once we get 25k pops and promote up to a city, we can effectively really control quite well here as Mali where we are pushing the pops. And so we're going to push a line from coast to coast, I think, or from coast to this location here all the way over. And so by doing this, we will get a really thick vein by which we can push control, because each of those pound lock canals is effectively going to be +5 control, and it's going to be +5 control that gets pushed downstream, where you are going to get +5 for each link in the chain. And so this is really going to allow us to get really high proximity, throughout this entire area, which, we haven't taken a look at the resources yet, but this is really where the resources are. They're extremely good resources. We have the gold up here, into all the gold down here. There is saffron down here, but this is, we can connect in to this vein a little bit. This is kind of far, but then coming down here, we do have saffron in this city. It's maybe worth downgrading this city, I don't really know, and trying to find a different spot, but as far as the connections go, this is in a really nice spot. And then we see gold, a little bit of saffron here, saffron, and a ton of saffron on the coast. That might be easier to get to coastally, but this is where the really value is in this arc, and so our strategy is to create a vein along this arc, and as you go inland, there's a whole lot less value on the resources, just generally speaking, and a whole lot less value over here. So it's really about this arc combined with probably through the coast, pushing into this. And a big reason why we want to push through the coast is down here is a forest, it is jungle, it is difficult to get development in these areas, and so it's probably going to be easier to push through the coast, and it's also hills, plateau, wetlands, all this nastiness, and so it's going to be really hard to push control alongside alongside or through the inland to the coast, and so we probably have to do it from the coast, which means we might even have to go naval as the game goes on instead of being land oriented. So let's talk a little bit about expansion. We did start going in on this province here, colonizing, and in theory we maybe want to dev this, but this is only 4 locations, and unfortunately this is actually where Woodlands is. So this is really where the Woodlands starts on the map, and so this is this area like right here, and this is a bit unfortunate because Woodlands, or sorry, forests rather than woods, is an additional 25% distance cost capital malice, so we don't want to run our vein through there. And in fact, I do think it was even a little bit of a mistake here to decide to leave this rural, because this is woods, this is a forest, and so it's an additional 25% to run through here. And so if we realize this at this point, we would make an adjustment and look to push through here. But in particular, this is where a lot of the non-vegetated grasslands just kind of cruises through up high, and so this is one of the reasons we want to incorporate this area as well. There is a state that has quite a few locations. I think each of these has like 6 or 7 locations, so that means we are getting to hit dev province on a lot of different locations simultaneously, and there is 2 gold in here, which is quite nice, and some decent resources in here, and the resources in here aren't the best, but it's not going to be the worst for us either, in terms of what resources we're improving, because that does increase the RGO levels. We do get to hit 1 cotton and several rice, and rice is nice because it does give you more food, per level of the RGO. But by incorporating this, we can move the vein this way to the right and dodge out on the forest to some extent, although we are looking to finish this because you convert culture an entire province at a time. This is a culture we probably need to convert, and so by getting this completed, we can convert the entire culture here all at once and get a little bit more value out of our cabinet action. As far as expansion goes over here, we are probably hitting the point where we are getting too much aggressive expansion towards all these animist, tribes that are remaining, but that doesn't really make too big a difference because at this point we should be able to fight all of them simultaneously, and it wouldn't be too much of a problem. We also go in on Benin relatively early because we want to incorporate this in 10 years time, I think, to gain access to the market center in particular, but maybe not. We wouldn't be able to push any control here, so maybe we leave this one alone and we don't even look to incorporate a Tenkog Dogu, and rather just incorporate Songhai maybe, and this is kind of where we kind of end our push in terms of incorporation and integration, because I don't think we can get control out this far just quite yet. Maybe in a little bit, maybe it's justified to go for the incorporation, but there's no way we're pushing control to Benin, and so perhaps we should have taken control of the market capital, but we can also build overseas market areas or overseas market buildings in our subject over here if we really want to gain control over Benin. It's not like there's extremely good resources in this market, and so it's not really that big a deal. We also finish our colonization up here, and we have a little bit of an issue. That is, Castile has also colonized the same province, and so now we have a split province with Castile. This is going to be our long-term enemy over the course of this run. They are going to colonize very, very often alongside this route, along with Portugal, but Portugal's manageable in a way that Castile is not. Castile has way more pops than us, they're considerably stronger than us, and we do not want to tangle with them at this point in time, and they are going to be someone long-term who is going to force us and keep us honest and make us to actually develop the military rather than just the economics. You could see here, this is one of our unique buildings, the Sofa Stockade, I believe it is called, and we are putting them down in several areas. This is an interesting fortification. It's level 1, so it's not a very strong fortification, but it's a fortification that's employed by slaves, which means in territories like this, where we really can't get any pop attraction, and there's not very many pops there, the employment on here is considerably easier because we can just ship slaves over here. We can also ship slaves to RGOs, and so in particular we put some of these stockades down in areas where we have basically no pops, but we also want to gum up the works a little bit, growing slightly weary of the Castilian menace, and in particular this will give zona control to this area, so Castile can't just march through here and into our kind of soft underbelly up here, whereas the south we will be protected by malaria, where Castile can't march through it. This northern area is going to be our weakness and is going to be a focal point if we do actually engage with Castile, and Castile plays somewhat intelligently and avoids the malaria. I do think it's also worth noting that one of the reasons this was one of our first colonies, it's colonizing so slow, is because areas with a lot of population take a lot longer to colonize, and so even though this is just a couple locations, and we already have partial control of that Asante state, and even though we started this one first, we are finishing these other colonizations considerably earlier as a result of them having considerably less population. We will likely finish the offshore island, splitting it with Spain, long before this, but this is going to give us an area, a way to ingress into Brazil, and I think we might even be able to land Brazil before the next age because we are so close. And I think Mali is kind of unique in this as it regards to where we would be going next, and in particular, we are pushing the Poundlock Canal tech now at this point in time, and so this would be kind of the next phase here, getting that really, really deep kind of control all throughout this area. And in particular, if we do move, we're not going to move the capital anytime soon, but if we do move the capital here, we have an idea I think that is a bit interesting in that we have a market center here, and we would maybe want to create a market center here. This is all flatlands up here, and grasslands, farmlands, flatlands all here. So this is actually a spectacular area for an urban area, and so with that in mind, we could create in here a market capital somewhere a little bit off the coast, because you can't navally push market access, at least at this point in time, and we could get a really heavily urbanized area here. We could get the capital here and probably push 100 control in this area, and then probably push 100 control over here as well, and have these kind of two balls of heavily urbanized area around the capital that would be here in the kind of tricky location that otherwise would kind of gum us up in terms of separating half of our empire, the naval half on the left from kind of the land-based half on the right. And so this is, I think, a bit of an interesting idea. But with all that said, just kind of a little bit of a review of where we've gone. We were recovered from the plague and also our disaster event, looking to kind of cement ourselves in here in Mali, creating this power base up here and starting to urbanize and to diverge from being this initial opener where we were just resource-based, starting to change things up in terms of what we were doing with our remaining, cabinet action. We were just going after converting culture in a lot of places and pushing societal values, something like this. But I think we're going to conclude this episode here. I don't know if we're going to continue this, because this does take quite a lot of time to be doing these, and I'm not sure their level of interest is still there. But I did want to give another one a go to kind of talk through some of the ideas of moving through developing a nation economically as it relates to kind of during the Renaissance area and some of these transitions and the creation of, I think, a creation of like an infrastructure where like these ideas are starting to mesh together, and you can kind of see where and how the mechanics are informing your play patterns in a way that it is creating something that you can see kind of organically evolving as time goes on, in a way that is not just like just putting cities in random places and this type of thing, but in a sort of cohesive, coherent way. But if you like this video, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, this type of stuff. And if this video does well enough, maybe we'll do another one to look to finish out the Renaissance age, and look to kind of prepare for an eventual conflict with Spain. From our experience, Spain was relatively passive and didn't attack us when we were playing Mali, but this was always kind of in the back of our heads that, Castile, that this was definitely a potential, and this was a weakness, and this was a source of unease, especially as they started to colonize just south of us, which they did pretty aggressively. And so I hope you enjoyed. We already said the YouTube algorithm stuff, so with that, I will wish you a good day.